let's look at the history palette and the history brush. The history palette, which you would find again under Window, is used to track the things that you do, and it will track the last 20 things that you have done. The last 20 things that you have done. And when you want to undo or go backward, you can either use the shortcut, which is on your Command Z and then Command Option Z, and go back numerous steps, or you can do it by clicking here, you see, in the history palette. And when you use the shortcuts, you'll see the changes take place in the history palette when you see, it toggles through them. So it keeps track of the last 20 things that you've done. And if you've been working for half an hour, you'll have a lot more than 20 different changes you might have made in your canvas. And as you proceed, another part of the history palette is that you can take something called a snapshot, so that even if you go past those 20 steps, the snapshot or that version of the image when you took the snapshot is saved. Now, and what I mean by that is, let's say right now I want to keep a version of this file with these green bars, and so I would come down to the very bottom of the history palette and I would click the little camera, which means take a snapshot, and you'll see it will rise immediately to the top of the history palette. So I'll click that, and there you see I can very quickly go back to the original version of the image, as you can see it here, or I can very quickly go back to this version, and you can make as many of these as you want. Now, the entire history and all of the snapshots are lost when you close the file. So it's only temporary while you're working on the file at any one session that you can continue to continuously use the history and any of your snapshots. Otherwise, all that information is lost as soon as you close the file, and so it's not permanent. But you also have another aspect to the image and the history palette called the history brush. The history brush. And the history brush is over here in your tool palette, and it is right here. The history brush, it looks like the little paintbrush, but it has a counterclockwise little arrow on it, and that's the history brush. And so I can take that brush, and then I can come over to my image, and I can very easily choose that and decide that I want to paint part of my image back to the way it was. As a matter of fact, what I'm going to do even before that is I am going to do another version of my canvas here so that you can see very clearly this process. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the dune, which is behind the stripes, and I am going to change its hue and saturation quite dramatically. And there you see I have done that. Okay, here you go. Really ramp up the color so it's pretty wacky. And for the moment I'm going to go ahead and then also turn off my stripes. And so you see that the sand dune, I have changed it now to being purple, and the color's pretty wacky. But right next to each of these steps, if I go back before to the version of the image before I turned off the stripes, And before I change the color, you can see the canvas look this way. And so what I can do is, in this little box here that starts out empty, I can click the history brush. And wherever I paint with the history brush, it will return the canvas back to looking like this instead of the way it currently looks. And so, having said that, I will get my history brush. I'm going to get a pretty good sized brush here. And as I paint, notice what's happening. Where I paint with the history brush, it is returning the sand dune back to the way it was in the step previous to the image back here when it looked like this. So by clicking what version, if you will, of the image that you want to see, you can do that with the history brush and then use the history brush to return that part of the image to the way it was in that step very, very quickly and very easily. And you can do some fun things with that.